Welcome to Chris Parkin Shooting Sports. Today we're going to do a little video on my 6-month experience using the PARD 008S, both in standard and LRF format. I've been using the standard format on a 223 Foxing rifle, and although I have used that on the Foxing rifle, I've used the LRF version mostly on the air rifle, where I'm a little bit more needy of some more ballistic calculations because of the varied ranges that I'll be using an FAC rifle from, mainly for pest control. I didn't find so much need for the laser range finding capability on a Foxing rifle because I generally like to shoot on land I know well. I know my distances well, and with a 223 flat caliber like that, I can do mostly everything with a point blank range 0. I know where I can aim central, I know where I need to aim a little bit high up into the shoulder, etc, etc. Both of them can be set up on up to 5 rifles, so once you've used the Picatinny rail mounting system and got used to that, it's easy to swap backwards and forwards. You can zero it on up to 5 rifles, and each of those rifles can have red, white, yellow or green reticles on them to suit as you need, and you can, of course, you can swap that reticle colour anytime you like. Reticle shapes, you can have 5 reticle shapes with various crosshairs, aim over marks, circles, dots, etc, or you can turn the reticle off completely. Both of them offer a gyroscope capability, which gives you both inclination, declination and also compass direction as well, if that's really needed for you. You can set up various default settings in the menu system. Number 1, you can set it whether you want to turn on at 6.5 or 13 times magnification. You can also set it as to whether you want it to come in full colour daylight mode or black and white mode for dark. And akin to that, you can also set it as to whether you want it to come in on stage 0, 1, 2 or 3 on the onboard illuminator setting, because it has an onboard IR illuminator. Talk a bit more about that in a minute. Other settings you can change screen brightness, at 0, 1, 2 or 3. You can also set it up to do auto recording, so when you switch it on, it will start recording immediately, which is great, if you're likely to be wanting to do it in a hurry, and do turn it off completely to save battery. Loop recording is the second option, where it will keep going round and round and round, and it will record either the last 3, 5 or 10 minutes of your activities. You can set up time and date and it will actually print that on the footage for you. I do find that very useful actually, because it's interesting to know when you may have seen foxes, etc, and when you need to return to hopefully catch that on a repeat pattern the following night if you didn't get the chance to take it on the first night. The button controls are tactile, but you can set them up to beep if you want to. I personally don't want anything to beep and make noise when I'm out shooting at the dark. And one of the last things you might set up is the automatic exposure level of the sensor within to give you the brightness you need on screen, because the screen brightness does have multiple setup modes. Here is the great joy of digital night vision. You can easily zero in daylight without any problem at all. It's a moving reticle system, and you can zero it on 5 rifles or with 5 different types of ammunition on the same rifle. Just after I got it set up on the air rifle the first time, I did some plinking on some steel targets and got used to using the rangefinder and started playing around with the ballistic coefficients. It's a shame you can't see the holdover mark on screen, but it does work, believe me, and the fact you can choose between the cross, the hash mark or a square makes it easy to set up your own aiming solution exactly as you prefer it. I'm experimenting here with the maximum distance the laser rangefinder works on different surfaces. The rangefinder is rated from 3.5 to 1200 metres, but reflection is very much dependent on the background. I've had reliable results out to about 600 metres with a dense foliage background. On smaller quarry, it's often easier to actually aim the laser next to it. Just a note again, although you can't see it on the recorded playback, the holdover hash mark was displayed every time I did a new rangefinder reading. In terms of the physical controls on the unit itself, the primary on button is on here. You press that, a few seconds later the display comes on. The lens cap opens here, protects the objective on the front, and you've got a really nice focusing dial here which runs all the way from about 2 metres out to infinity. And it's got just enough friction, it holds position well. You can fold that lever flat if you want, but with the lever out it means you've got superb dexterous control with just a fingertip of focal distance without disturbing your aim point too much. The 4 buttons on top run through. Magnification at the front changes between 6.5 and 13 times. The second button controls the video camera setup and the still, so you can set it recording manually if you want to, if you don't want to use either loop record or auto recording. I personally prefer to use it on manual control. The third button here changes between daylight mode and darkness mode. So in daylight mode you've got full colour picture, and in darkness mode when you flick over to that, obviously that's black and white for nighttime use. This third button also controls the onboard illuminator, which has a complete off or 1, 2, 3 levels of intensity to actually illuminate your objects in nighttime use. The last button at the back enters the menu structure, and it's well worth experimenting with all these buttons and getting used to tactile control, which will work from either hand, and getting used to them so you can use them in the dark at night. Those buttons are all the same between the two models. The only other control we've got here is the screen focus inside, which gives you a nice sharp picture, and once that's set up you don't need to control it. There's a rubber bellows on the back just to seal out extraneous light, and you've got a little vent hole there so you don't build up too much heat inside from your skin, creating condensation on the internal lens. On the left side of the unit there's a control at the front which is telescopic, which is what focuses the actual infrared illuminator, which is housed in there. The other thing in this cavity here, there's a screw cap on the back, and that will expose the 18650 flat top battery, of which you can carry spares very easily. This charges on board within the PARD, and I'll show you how in 1 second. Machining quality has increased massively on these, and you no longer get these grating when they go in or out. You don't get filaments of aluminium left behind, and it has a rubber O-ring seal to make sure atmospheric conditions aren't problematic. Addressing the right hand side, well, at the front we've got a Picatinny mount here so you can put additional illuminators on. Although the onboard illuminator is fine for about 75 or 100 metres depending on external light conditions or whether it's an overcast sky, etc. I think everybody knows the bigger and more powerful the illuminator is that you use a digital night vision, the better you're going to see, the better the image quality will be, and the further away you can engage quarry. So you don't need any tools to remove this cap on the right side, and underneath the cap it's got the USB-C charging port, and you get a USB-C cable with the PARD. So plug the USB-C in there and it charges the unit up. There's a red light when it goes on and off, and you can tell when the batteries are ready. In the front there's a space there for a micro SD card. That's what records all your footage. I use a 32GB one, I just find it's what works best. That clips in and clips out, and there's also an output there for video. This also has a rubber seal, and that helps with atmospheric protection on the unit. Well, both of these are the same in this respect, but I'm just going to switch over to the non-LRF unit and take it off the Picatinny rail of this 223 rifle just to show you how it does fit on or off. So on the underside you've got multiple positions on the extension rail here with Allen key sockets there. Take those off, you can put it in position, set it exactly as you want it for extension to make sure you've got the correct eye relief when it's mounted on your rifle. Of course, if you have got a full Picatinny rail on your rifle like this Sauer is or like the FX was, you can move the whole thing backwards and forwards as much as you need. The nuts on the side can be tightened up using an Allen key in the little hole there, or you can tighten them up with a spanner or socket if required. There's also a cross slot here which is what resists recoil. Concentrating on the LRF unit now, which has got the ballistic capability. On the side here, this is the ballistic rangefinder effectively. It sends a laser out, takes the laser back, and it calculates the distance to your target. You can set this up in meters or yards, and whether you set it up in metric or imperial units will affect how the actual ballistic menu itself appears. When you start setting up the ballistic menus, there are 5 available, so you can set those up for different rifles or different projectiles or ammunition types. Muzzle velocity is required, as well as the bullet weight and ballistic coefficient. These aren't unusual for any kind of ballistic solving software, and it's well worth researching this. And I'll tell you before you start, be prepared to set these up and refine this solution as you actually use the rifle and learn a little bit about how it works. Other factors you need to enter are altitude, temperature. It's very important to enter accurate data for the scope height above the bore line, because that helps you and helps the unit itself calculate the precise trajectory before and after the exact point and distance you zero out. The zero range is the last function you need to enter into the ballistic menu, and it is of course probably one of the most important of all. On this trip to the farm I was being watched by a barn owl, probably looking to see what I was shooting that it could have been eating. This was actually a domestic rabbit that somehow got out of its enclosure on the farm. It's a good job I could clearly see the dark coloration and knew that it wasn't fair quarry. Both units use 850nm frequency infrared light. On to the rats now. You can see me experimenting with infrared illuminator intensity on the PARD. The screen never whites out and I get good detail into the deeper shadows as well. There's quite a lot of light overspill here from farmyard lights, and it's an overcast evening, so I'm also getting a lot of reflection from the sky for great picture quality. So, when you actually want to use the rangefinder to calculate ballistics, what do you do? Well, essentially, you aim at your target and you press button number 2, that will turn the system on, and a second press will then send the laser out, return the laser, and it will calculate your distance, which it then displays on the screen. It will also display a ballistic correction mark on the screen on the reticle itself. And essentially what that means is that on your cross-shaped reticle you'll receive a mark underneath that reticle, and that reticle tells you where to aim. So you then put the new mark on your point of aim, which is where you want the bullet to impact or pellet to impact, and that will theoretically, if all the data has been entered correctly and you've refined this data to make sure it is right, will then hit your quarry or target exactly as you want it to do. There are 3 choices of holdover mark. You can have a simple square, you can have a sort of hyphen, complete flat line across the lower stage of the reticle, or you can actually have an X which sits on the lower stage of the reticle. And that, depending on the distance you're actually aiming and practicing at, will move in position instantaneously every time you range the target to give you a perfect correction for precise holdover position. You can also choose the display colour of yellow, green or blue to contrast the best with your reticle colour, which you'll have probably chosen earlier on, and also your likely background. And you might change this depending on whether you're shooting in strong daylight, poor light, or even after dark in the black and white mode on the scope. I brought one of these back from British Shooting Show in February 2022, and the one I had was one of the late prototypes. It was as you see them now, but there were some slight firmware changes on that which they then updated, and of course as customers have gone on we've actually seen these in possession. I sent that one back and then I received a full production model, which was this one. I also then went for the non-LRF unit because I just wanted to use that on a foxing rifle. And I've enjoyed using both. I like the fact they're very compact, I like the fact they're lightweight. I do like the Picatinny and Allen key mounting on here, which gives you a huge range of eye relief setup on them. And in terms of the eye relief itself, in terms of your distance from the scope, I've shot this on a 243 and I don't find it problematic in terms of recoil. It's easy to charge the batteries using the USB-C cable. You can also run a cable on it with an additional battery if you want to keep it running all night long. The on-off button will turn the screen on and off, so you can save battery in that respect. And of course, it's really easy to swap the 18650 batteries whether in daylight or darkness, and I have no problem at all carrying some spares to give me extra runtime. The onboard illuminator on the LRF version that's on this air rifle gets used a lot because around the farmyard, shooting rats and feral pigeons, it's everything I need. I do have a larger illuminator added if I do ever need it, because this is an FAC rifle and it will give me more energy if I need to stretch the ranges out, taking on some rabbits or hares. In terms of the foxing version, yes, I think I do prefer an external illuminator because it just gives me range and I can see foxes out as far as 300 metres. A lot of that is thanks to the illuminator. But it's very important to consider light conditions because when you've got an overcast sky, you get a lot of external light reflected back down onto the ground, onto quarry species, whereas when you've got a clear sky, that all disappears up into the air and you don't appreciate that. On a moonlit night, you've of course got masses of external light to illuminate your quarry, but in sort of semi-urban places you get a lot of urban light pollution, and around the farmyard there are usually floodlights here and floodlights there, and that is why specifically on this airgun version I've never put a bigger illuminator on it, because it does everything I need. I often say with digital night vision that the greatest benefit is the fact you can zero them in daylight without any problems at all. You can use them in daylight and you can appreciate all the functionality, especially this LRF unit where you can make extended shots. Then of course, as light fades, you can appreciate slightly grainier but still colour imagery all the way through till complete darkness. And I've found on this I do get good image contrast, especially when you see things like rabbits or hares, you know, in a hedge line where you need a lot of colour contrast between the dark and the light to pick those things out. And I've found both units quite good at that contrast to pick out those quarry species in shadowy conditions. And then of course hold the button down, you change through to black and white mode. Now that doesn't actually necessarily always need the illuminator, because that will work a little bit later still than the colour mode will. And then when you do need the illuminator, you've got 4 intensity settings, one of them being off completely, or an additional IR illuminator, which will give you a lot of range. I'm zeroed on a 223 now and just preparing for some foxing this evening. I'm just filming some woodies nestled down in the grass, and you can easily see them and the coloration stands out quite well. That's actually in black and white mode in daylight, but I'm going to flick to colour now and it will show you this hare, which is about 80 metres away. Just focusing, got a nice sharp picture. As you can see, I can get a precision aim point if required, although hares aren't on the quarry list here. Those two hares stand out well, with excellent contrast of the black tips and coloration of their ears against the grass around them. This hare can't have been more than about 20 metres away. Look at the incredible detail available and the precision focus. Video resolution is 1920 by 1080 pixels. The eyepiece resolution is 1024 by 768. Contrast and resolution show up well here because you can still see this hare nestled down in the grass. You can also hear the button click slightly as I increase the magnification from 6.5 to 13 times. I think this clip demonstrates very well how smoothly you get rendition of a fast moving object like that hare with a 30 frame per second refresh rate on PARD. It was interesting to be able to keep track of this hare as it went in and out of the shadows underneath the foliage. It's now complete darkness and we're into black and white mode. You can see great detail on this hare, and it's not all about eye shine, you can also see the detail of its fur. I'm using an external PBIR-L illuminator here, which gives me longer range capability with the PARD. The refresh rate is again visible because you can see easily the resolution as it's scratching itself. The onboard 5-watt illuminator is rated to work out to 350 metres, but to be honest I think it's more realistic to look at it about 100 metres maximum rimfire or airgun ranges. Even with strong infrared light reflection, we're not overexposing the PARD sensor, and it still retains good image resolution and contrast between the light and the dark areas. While scanning for the foxes with a thermal spotter, we picked up this hare, which is just over 200 metres away. Battery life is rated at 8 hours, but I do find that's very dependent on what features and functionality you're using and how often you do remember to turn it off if for long periods when you're not using it. I would definitely carry a spare. You can actually send signal out via Wi-Fi to an app on a smart device. I first spotted this fox mingling with the hares about 150 metres away. I'm adjusting intensity of the infrared illuminator to get the best picture and calling it, and hopefully it'll start coming in towards me. As it comes in, I'm able to use the fingertip control to make sure I keep sharp focus. This is quick and intuitive to use, easy to reach with either hand. I've dropped it down to 6.5 magnification because I prefer to keep the larger field of view. You can easily see the bright reflection from its eyes, but that's not to diminish the fact you can still see its body easily moving, with clear differentiation between the legs, tail, head and fur of course. I'm calling this one gently and it now really responds and decides to set off towards me. I take advantage of it pausing to try and get some really good quality footage of it. It comes in from about 100 metres to 75 to 50 metres before I take a shot at it. That's two dog foxes taken cleanly with the same equipment in both daylight and darkness conditions, both on a 223 rifle using the PARD 008S. Overall dimensions are 182 by 71.5 by 53.5 millimeters. Overall weight is 415 grams for the non-LRF unit and 455 grams for the range-finding version. Both units are supplied with a full instruction book which describes the functions and details. I would definitely recommend writing down your zeroing coordinates separately, because it's always good to just make sure, and if you do ever do any firmware updates or big changes, double check the coordinates haven't been changed before you actually shoot the rifle, and if necessary just double check zero and you can re-zero if necessary. Both units can be set up to record sound as well as video, so you can record all those little comments you make with your hunting buddies when you are out and learn some of your lessons. I actually find it quite useful sometimes to say something to it after I've either done something right or made a slight mistake, or say to myself, next time I'm going to just maybe change the focus slightly or change my illuminator settings, and I find that a great setup technique. And it also reminds me to just list the fact that I can say, just change that BC slightly, check your muzzle velocity and things like that when I want to refine my ballistic solutions. One thing you won't see on the video, although it records the reticle, the quarry, the full image, etc., is it doesn't show the actual holdover mark projected on the reticle. I have actually on a couple of previous videos drawn the X on just using a green font and put it actually on the crosshair just to demonstrate what you'll visually see through the scope. And of course, if you use the actual horizontal hyphen or the box, that will be displayed similarly. And yes, real time it's fantastic, but you won't see that in the recorded footage, which is a slight shame, but I'm told the PARD engineers may add this on the next firmware update. Well, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you can keep track of the regular uploads. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.